Hey everyone, Andre here, along with Tom Arnold, to discuss Donkey Kong Country 2's 25th anniversary with some of the original staff members on the game, including Steve Mayles and Chris Sutherland. So guys, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks, Andre.
Absolutely, yes, going really good.
It's great having you here. I really appreciate you guys stepping in and to discuss with us one of my favorite games of all time. So I guess before we get too deep into things, could you briefly describe your roles on the game? Let's go and start off with you, Chris. What did you do for Donkey Kong Country 2?
Yeah, I think I'm listed as Chief Keyboard Tapper on both DKC1 and DKC2, or that may have actually been another different game I listed.
No, that was Banjo.
You see, I've got mixed up already.
You just can't remember.
can't remember these things.
It was all serious. It was all serious credits for this game. It was,
Chris. Yes. In fact, I'm looking at them now. I was head programmer. I programmed heads. So yeah, I was head programmer. So basically, that meant I was supposedly in charge, but I wasn't. It was kind of more of a collaborative effort between there's three programmers on the first game. There was 4 on the second game, so we did increase by 1. And so my job was working on character moves and things like the animals, riding on the animals, and the animals moving by themselves, that kind of thing.
Great, perfect. And how about you, Steve? What was your exact role in Donkey Kong Country 2?
So I'm listed as characters and animation. Which means I did most of those for this game. So I had quite a lot of interaction with Chris. I'd dump a disc on his desk for him to put various frames into the game.
Perfect. Yeah, and there were a lot of frames in this game based on all the new characters and everything. So I imagine there's probably quite a few discs you handed over.
Yes.
And then there's also quite a few frames that I probably didn't put in, like on the first one.
Well, of course, yeah. Unfortunately.
I used to annoy Steve because he would generate these animations with lots of detail and really smooth, and then I'd think, well, we can't have all these frames for all this animation because there won't be room for everything else, so I would arbitrarily just chop every second one out or something. That looks about right to me.
Good enough. That actually brings up, I guess, a question I was going to bring up later. I will bring it up now. So I believe both Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country 2 were both shipped on 32 megabit cartridges. But Donkey Kong Country 2 just felt like a much bigger game. How did you cram all of that into what I believe was the same amount of space? Was there new compression methods you used, or was it just smarter asset usage? Do you remember much of the process for how you fit so much into what's now a really tiny package?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact details, but I would imagine that what happened was that we would have, when we were finishing the first game, often you got to squeeze things into memory, and then it's perhaps towards the end, when you're doing those investigations, you realize, if we'd only have done this, then there'd be a technique to make a big improvement. But sometimes it's too late to make that change right at the end of the game. So I would imagine that's probably what happened, was that at the end of the first game, we would have found out things that we would do to improve and compress things. So they probably took advantage of that in the second game.
Okay, I was just going to say, so nothing like, let's say what Mario did with flipping tiles around or changing their palettes or anything like that.
No, I mean, I think we'd done a lot of stuff in the first game in order to develop the technology to be able to reduce all those colors down to a small number of tiles. So we had done a lot of that kind of stuff, but maybe we were perhaps a bit better able to budget those things for the second game, because like you say, there was a lot more in terms of characters and different enemies and things. So I think it was more a case of just the way we budgeted things and arranged stuff in memory. I can't actually remember how much space was free in the first game, but I'm sure somebody on the interwebs would have that details.
Probably. Yeah, I actually remember specifically, I think it was when you're writing Rambi the Rhino in the second one, that I think the idle animation that was in the first was cut from the second. I'm like, I wonder if that's when the developers just reached the cap for the memory limits. Something's gotta go, which could be Rambi's idle animation or whatever it was, to my memory.
It could be, yeah. I've noticed cases where there's things where they were looking at back from now. There's things where I think, it's strange we didn't have an animation in this situation or an animation in that situation. And that's probably the reason why, or I just never got around to putting them in.
Is that tough for you, Steve, to see your animations?
Well, you just kind of you learn to live live with it. Most of the
Right.
time when that sort of thing happens, it's towards the end of a project. Maybe I'm like twiddling my thumbs and thinking, oh, maybe I can do another idle animation and bully Chris to put it in. But often he said no.
So, as you were kind of touching on a moment ago, you probably were looking at like how much memory you had available after Donkey Kong Country 1, and it reminds me of the fact that Donkey Kong Country 1 came out November 21st, 1994. Donkey Kong Country 2 came out on November 21st, 1995. So we're recording this almost a year after our previous discussion with you guys about Donkey Kong Country's 25th anniversary. A year, so seemingly that's 1 year development time for what seemed to be a massive sequel, which would be absurd by today's standards. So did you really only have a year or less in which to make this game? Did you go immediately from DKC1 to DKC2? Like, do you remember what that process was like? Was it hectic? Like, how did that work exactly?
Well, my recollection is, it's interesting to see what Steve remembers, but my recollection was we rolled pretty much straight onto it because we knew that from the reception that we'd seen at CES, that it was going to be a big hit. So
right.
We thought it's just go straight into it. And also, there was a bunch of ideas that probably didn't get into the first one, and we were able to take advantage of that. And I guess we'd built a lot of the underlying technology, or we'd got used to the way things work. Like we had for the first game, there was one of the engineers, Mark Wilson, who built a banana editor, which is basically allows the designer to place bananas in particular patterns and things and move them around the level. And all that technology had been set up and done, so it was a case of refining it and just tweaking it a bit more so we could start to build levels a lot sooner than we could on the first game.
Yeah, it was a very easy transition from the first one to the second. As Chris says, the only other game like that I can remember is like Banjo-Kazooie Tatooine it was a smooth thing. There was probably ideas from the first one that we couldn't fit in, so we kind of had a bit of a running start.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a few of us that carried on doing the daft overtime that we'd done on the first game to get that done. We just carried on doing exactly the same for this game, so we really did, almost every waking moment was spent making this game. So that's one of the reasons why it was done in a year.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's it's really impressive. So mostly refinements on the techniques you already had. Like, did anything like having fur kind of take a lot of work, or?
No, well, I used the fur for the promotional stuff, but it took a long time to render, and doing some tests, you didn't notice it on the in-game sprites. So the in-game sprites don't use the fur.
I was actually going to. Oh, the in-game sprites don't use the fur. I remember there being a pretty I remember reading probably the EGM articles or Nintendo Power articles back in the day, and I remember there being like a pretty big focus on on the addition of fur. So that was only for the character models and for the marketing models and not the in-game models. I feel retroactively ripped off now.
You've been robbed.
I think they actually looked worse in-game with the fur on because it kind of took away a lot of the sort of shading detail. So it actually made them look worse.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And my mind's like kind of blown now. Like, I've been lied to all these years.
It was great to have it for the promo stuff. And we had, I think, was it on DK2 where we had... Because on the first one, we just had to like push the geometry into each other. There was no way of like smoothly blending between joints. Whereas I think on Donkey Kong Country 2, we were able to do that. But again, I'm pretty sure it wasn't done in game because, again, you just didn't notice it and it took a lot longer to render.
Gotcha. Right, it makes sense looking back. Those character sprites, though they felt big at the time, like they're not. The resolution isn't, obviously super high these days, so it kind of makes sense. Although I guess to the game's credit, you did introduce a character that was based entirely around hair, of course, being Dixie Kong. So do you remember much about where the design for her came from, and if you had the character design first and her function of being able to fly in the air followed, or did you get the idea you wanted a flying character, then Dixie evolved from that? If you could speak a little bit more to that, that'd be great.
It's very, very hard to remember. Some days I think, yeah, the ponytail came first, and I think I was interviewed like a few years ago when we went to E3 with Yooka-Laylee, and I said, oh yeah, the ponytail came first and the moons came later. But thinking back, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that was the case. So I'm not. I don't know. I just remember that. I remember there being an early version of it. It was basically Diddy with a ponytail, and it just looked a bit like sort of Diddy in sort of dress up, which looked ridiculous. So I thought, I've got to try and remodel her a bit to look a little bit more feminine. But yeah, I can't remember, and I bet Chris can't either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was probably a kind of mixture of both. I think there was probably that test that you did, and then the idea of the hair flowing behind her probably made us think, that's something that might be something in that, so it might be worth following up on. That's often how a lot of these things developed, is it's kind of try one thing and then see what ideas it brings.
Right. Yes, because as it turned out, the helicopter spin with the hair was, it's the move everyone uses, isn't it? Just to make things a lot easier. I know I used it a lot in my recent playthrough, as well as the rewind feature, of course, which I promised myself I'd never use, but I was using it after about the third level.
When you were developing the game, do you guys consider that players would use Dixie more than Diddy? And did you try to make swapping happen more often?
Yeah, I think Diddy does have improved abilities in some areas. I know when I wanted to roll off an edge, his move just seemed a lot better. Maybe Chris can remember more about those sorts of values that were tweaked.
I don't remember the exact values. I believe Diddy is faster, but I tend to remember when I play is that it tends to be, if I find myself with Diddy, I usually tend to swap back, which is a good sign. As I've learned that using the hair spin is a great save feature. So if you want to, you're jumping over something and you think, I'm not going to make it, that's it's always a great opportunity to save yourself and get to the other side. So I would imagine that probably that's what most people did, but we did try and put things in. I think the aim was that they would be balanced, and the expectation is, to assist with that, we put in things like those barrels that were only usable by one of the other characters to kind of force you to swap back and forth. And then the idea of throwing the other character as well, again, that was something else to try and increase the interaction between them, rather than it being just something like you're the main character and there's this other thing that just drags along behind you.
Like the first one.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Looking back now, it seems pretty bold, really, to have your central character of the first game, being, of course, Donkey Kong, being kidnapped and largely absent from pretty much the entirety of the experience, including even on the box art. Do you remember that being was that at all an issue that was considered back, when you were developing the game, that hey, our titular character is pretty much missing, and we're going to focus on Diddy, our the new character from the previous one, as well as his brand new character in the form of Dixie?
I can't. I mean, maybe Chris knows differently, but I can't remember it being an issue. It was just, isn't Donkey Kong in this one? Oh no. Oh, okay, fair enough. The kind of, I guess we're thinking the game would speak for itself. It was coming out hot on the heels of one of the biggest games ever for the Super Nintendo. So. Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, it was quite a bold move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think, I would imagine the success of the first one kind of give us some leeway to basically change things up as whatever way we wanted, because it was a case of, okay, if you're going to make a sequel, yeah, great. Don't bother, just make it quickly, get it out. I guess that was the kind of the demand for that was there, and. No, I don't think anybody was really going to complain unless we were going to do anything drastic with any Nintendo characters. Mm-hmm. And I think it gave it a nice twist as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's part of the reason why it's so fondly remembered these days, is the fact that it very clearly is a sequel to Donkey Kong Country, but it still feels like its own thing. It evolved that game in the best possible ways, and it really felt like something unique, while obviously being a follow-up to the original. And to the point that it wasn't until years later that I recognized the amazing pun in the title, Diddy's Conquest. So great.
There's a load of people that seem to think it was called Diddy's Conquest or Diddy Conquest, or
Mhm.
there's many different combinations of those that come out. But yeah, that's right. I think there's quite a few people have said that they didn't spot the pun until later on.
Right.
I guess maybe that's a good sign.
I think it is. That really shows, that it works no matter how you read it. So that's the cleverness of it. Do you remember? I don't suppose you remember who came up with that title. Was that when the development staff, or was that marketing? Do you remember anything of how that came about?
I would imagine it would be Greg or Tim.
Yeah, they usually had a big list, didn't they? Actually, I think probably all the development team were usually encouraged to come up with names for the game, and so we'd have a list of some absolutely ridiculous options that were soon thrown in the bin. So yeah, like Chris says, it would have been Greg or Tim, I'd have thought.
Yeah, because it was similarly. Dixie Kong also had a different. I think she was called Daisy originally, wasn't she?
Yes, in all my files, I called her Didette.
That's right,
So it's
Didette.
like Didette run, Didette jump. but they didn't want to go with Didette.
Wow, that'll been interesting. Everyone will be asking for Didette Kong now in Smash Brothers rather than Dixie.
That's right. She
Which
might
would be
have
slightly
more
strange.
success.
It'd be strange in a way, because if there was Diddy Kong, but then his girlfriend was called Didette, and it's like, why would his girlfriend be called the same, a female version of his own name? That was slightly strange.
Yeah, that would be a little odd, wouldn't it?
I expect whether she was girlfriend or sister was probably, a last-minute decision anyway.
Yeah, were there like internal arguments about that? No, she has to be his girlfriend, can't be his sister. Like, did this draw like a line internally? You remember how that worked?
No,
I don't think there was on that one particularly. Not that I can remember now.
Okay.
I think there's debate about some other issues we'll probably get onto later, but on other.
I have a quick one. Just talking about, continuing development on the Super Nintendo. At the time with next generation systems kind of coming out, were you guys happy to continue working on the Super Nintendo and create the best game possible, or were you wishing to work on a new system?
No, me personally, I was happy, very happy to work on another game on the Super Nintendo, because the first Donkey Kong Country, there was quite a lot of experimentation there. A lot of the time, in the early months, I didn't know what I was doing, so it was nice to get onto a sequel where I knew exactly what I was doing with the 3D software, and we could just churn stuff out with a few problems. So yeah, I was happy, but I mean, we were aware of the other systems coming up, like you say, and there was I kind of got the feeling of course that Nintendo obviously didn't put as much of a marketing push behind this game as the first one, understandably, because the first one was so groundbreaking, and secondly because they were starting to focus on the N64.
And I guess kind of to that point, obviously Donkey Kong Country was, it looked amazing when it came out, and Donkey Kong Country 2 somehow ended up looking even better, which is, for me as a player, it's hard to pinpoint exactly why that is. So I was wondering if if there was a focus internally on making sure the game looked even more advanced than the original, and what exactly that involved. Obviously, we already covered the fact that there's actually no hair in the game, but is there anything else that you intentionally worked on to make it look even better and compete with the upcoming generation of systems?
No, I don't think so. I mean, some of the stuff I've read says, how much better the game looks than the first, and I'm not so sure it does. I think some of the locations are more interesting, and some of the characters are more interesting, because we had the whole pirate theme to wrap them up in. The maps are probably better designed as well, but I can't remember anything being any different really. The artists were different.
Yeah, and I guess things like you have the boss levels, where on the first game all the bosses were kind of within a single screen set piece, whereas the bosses here tended to have different arenas or setups to them, so they were kind of more interesting. And I think from the first game there was a lot learned about the different kind of effects that we could do, and I think those were built up on as well, so you could see different things like shafts of light and some levels, and so probably the library of different effects that we could have were kind of built up and added to in the second game. So I think that's possibly another reason why people might say it looks better, is because maybe there's more layering of or clever ways of layering things in terms of effects.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Lockjaw's locker, isn't it? The underwater one. I was amazed by the parallax effect that was going on in the background there. Very clever.
That is exactly what I was thinking of when I was asking that question, because you have the parallax that's not just horizontal but vertical too, which I believe the vertical may have been new to the series. I don't think Donkey Kong Country 1 had the vertical parallax. I could be misremembering, and I just remember that adding like an extremely convincing 3D layer, even beyond what we'd already seen with the computer modeled characters.
Yeah.
Just on that too, like with Glimmer the Anglefish, with something like that, it almost looks like a Super FX chip effect. Like, did you guys ever consider using something like the Super FX chip to make Donkey Kong Country 2 like even better, or was that kind of out of the question? You wanted to use just the base Super Nintendo?
I guess we probably would have focused on the base machine, because if you go for the something that needs an extra chip, typically that means that you have to the cost might be more per cartridge, so therefore you end up with less revenue. So I would imagine that there'd be a push for always having it on the most widely available or cartridge, or most one can most fit it into.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it was something we consciously considered using something like Super FX or whether that would have been suitable. I don't know whether it was just for the kind of 3D things or whether it could be used for 2D. It probably could, but I don't think it was something we actually looked into.
Gotcha. Out of curiosity, I think if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you, at least for the first game, Nintendo was relatively hands-off and largely left it to you to develop the first game. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was wondering if that carried over to the second one, how much involvement Nintendo may have had, or if it really was, hey, just continue what you're doing. It worked the first time. Just give us a sequel and have at it.
Yeah, I mean they were actually more hands-off, I think, for the second one, from what I remember. In that, for the first one, I think there was some suggestions from Mr. Miyamoto, but I think that was less so in the second one. And I think probably because we were able to deliver the first one and it was successful, there was probably less pressure on us. Or when I say us, it's probably that would have gone through Tim and Chris anyway. So there was probably less conversations that they had back on the first one. They were very, very. It seemed like every night or every few nights they were talking to somebody from Nintendo America. That was not in terms of content. I guess it was more just in terms of keeping them up to date on scheduling and how things are going, as opposed to actually, put this cannonball in this place, that kind of thing. That wasn't. Right. And this, I don't know if you remember different, Steve.
No, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I can't remember. Like you say, the amount of time. Tim especially, because we worked in the same building as Tim. I was on the phone to Nintendo. I can't remember that happening as much on the second one, and I can't remember any graphics having to be changed in the second one.
And I guess
I'm just doing one thing that we might have been discussed would have been the video game Heroes screen, I guess, which was which may have had some controversy around it. I seem to remember there being a debate internally about what could and couldn't be on there and whether we could get away with the things that were on there.
I was going to ask about that, because looking back, that screen, even at the time, like as a kid, I'm like, how did they get all these video game characters, or at least references to them in here? As I recall, it had Mario and Link, which seems like that would be more doable. But then you also had Sonic the Hedgehog's shoes and Earthworm Jim's gun next to a garbage can with a sign that says "No Hopers."
Yeah.
How did you pull that off? Like, I don't think that can happen these days.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think anybody would want to do that these days. Or even attempt to do that. I guess back then, I can't even remember what it meant. It must have been. It wasn't like we were kind of desperately anti-Sega. I think it was just funny. I think that was the idea. We thought it would be quite funny if that was the case. And I believe it was the No Hopers sign and the shoes were removed when the Game Boy version came out. So I think there's obviously a decision there it probably wasn't the best political move to make.
I guess.
And
I was going to say a bit less internet back then, and that's just like the equivalent of a patch, I guess, to the Game Boy Advance version.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it wasn't meant in any malicious way. It was just meant as a kind of an amusing jape. But yeah, I guess it could have been construed differently.
And do you remember, like, was there when it came to the Mario and Link models, was there like much back and forth with Nintendo on that you're portraying these, of course, some of their most famous characters, basically for what's almost essentially the first time with a 3D appearance? Do you remember, like, if there was much was there much Nintendo involvement in that specifically, or was that pretty much like the rest of the game?
I think it was fairly straightforward. I mean, I didn't do any of those characters. That was Mark Stevenson, and as I remember, he did them fairly quickly, and I can't remember seeing more than one version of them in the game. So I'm assuming it was a fairly straightforward process. But I mean, today it really does seem amazing that we got those characters in there. Never mind the No Hopers sign, just the other Nintendo characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of character in general, one of the biggest changes I think with this game is the fact that you went all in on a pirate theme, which is, like, looking back, it's like, where did that come from? But it's something that really sticks out because it made the game feel very distinct, very different, and it was just a lot of fun. Like, it seemed clear that you guys were having some fun playing around with this theme, having like peg-leg pirates, Kremlin pirates, having giant sword bosses. So do you remember much where the idea for that came from, and what exactly the plan was to make use of, or how you were planning to make use of it for the game?
It had all come from Tim and Greg especially. He's always been a big fan of pirates, as you can see with Sea of Thieves, and of course the next game we did after DKC2 was Dream, which had a very strong pirate theme as well. Mm-hmm. But it was great because you had a theme to work with, and you mentioned the peg leg Kremlin in particular. That took me a while to get that animation right. So I got used to just animating one leg, and then I'd offset it and copy it to the other leg, and then you got a walk or a run cycle, and of course all of a sudden I've got this like asymmetrical peg leg character, so it took a while to get right now.
Yeah, well, you nailed it. I'm picturing it I can see it in my head right now. Like it had a lot of character to it. So
I think that one might even work better with less frames too, if that happened.
Yes, yeah. I think my favourite of the characters is probably the little guy with the swords, Cutlass, I think he was called. I remember re-rendering him many times just to get the perfect glint of light on his swords.
And as I recall, his swords get stuck in the environment when he uses them and misses, right?
Yeah.
It's a great touch. I guess, well, speaking of character design, you probably, I imagine you were involved in a fair amount of the new ones in this game. So I was wondering if you had like a particular favorite that stood out to you with, how many new models there were. Did you have any favorites when it came to design or how they were implemented into the game, or anything related to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I made some even to the returning ones, I think I made some good improvements. But out of the new ones, I like the big guy in the big coats. There's the one with the two massive hawks. Even though he's really, really annoying in the game.
Yes, he is.
I like that character. Oh, there's a bit on, which one is it? It's the level with the moving floor. The one in the castle, and there's two of these bloody hook guys throwing their hawks either side of the screen. And I kept rewinding it and trying again for about quarter of an hour. I just could not do it. But yeah, he's good but annoying. I like the guy in the sort of haunted guy. I think Cloak was his name, because he animated a bit different. He was like a floaty, flappy coat, so he was a lot of fun to do.
Steve, do you remember did you do Cat o' Nine Tails, or was that Mark?
No, that was one of Mark's. That was.
Right. Was that I read somewhere that somebody claimed it was influenced by Sonic. Is that true?
I don't. Again, that was another annoying character. If you got caught up in that bloody cat and he threw you into the air.
The worst. In that sticker bush level too. Like, of all the places for him to be. There were also a fair amount of new animal buddies in the game, such as I'm trying to remember their names now. I think Rattler the snake. We had a Squitter the spider. Or Squitter, I think.
Squirt, yeah.
So yeah, Squid the spider, and Ratley was the snake.
Yeah, that's it.
Snake. Yes, Ratley was like a direct replacement for Winky the frog. He was like the new jumping baddie, but we had so many problems with Winky's hits in the first game because he had that massive leg span and he kind of jumped at 45 degrees and he was an absolute nightmare to time the jumps right. So we thought, if we're going to have a jumping cat, let's just make him like a spring so it's completely vertical. So that was that's why Ratley is the way he is. But when I was playing it the other day, I still had issues with the jump on that bloody snake. So I'd be jumping on stuff, and occasionally you wouldn't get the same jump height as you just jumped, and I got so angry with it. So I hate the snake as well as the frog.
Oh, those poor animals.
He does have the charge jump though, but you have to really be patient to use that one, I guess.
You do have to be patient, especially when that liquid's catching you up on the top of the tower.
Yeah.
You notice things going back because when I'm looking at Squawks, for example, I realize we never properly fixed things so that when you jump on Squawks, the transition is smooth. So you jump on Squawks and the characters will appear, or they'll pop down, so everything shifts down. And I know why, because the origin is set to where the character's origin is. So it looks, we should have had some kind of getting onto Squawks animation to there. That's what we would have done these days, but back then I think we just said, that's fine, we'll move on to something else now, or we'll come back and fix that later, and it never did get fixed.
Yeah, after the new ones, I think the spider was successful. He had quite a lot of functionality as well with his web firing and his making of, the platform webs. That was cool. But we were worried it was going to be like creepy with the characters riding on the back of this bizarre spider. but it was kind of funny rather than creepy, so that's okay.
Yeah, I think you pulled it off quite well because the spider was one of my favorites too growing up, and I'm not a big spider fan. So in general, were there any cut animal buddies considered? Like any ideas or concepts for animal buddies you remember maybe experimenting with and it's just not working out, or any maybe aspects of a current animal buddy that didn't end up making the cut?
Not that I can remember, no.
No, I think most of the ones we tried, or all the ones we tried, just went in. So we got them to work in some fashion. I think again a lot of it was knowing the lessons from the last one. Like Steve said, when we had Winky the frog in the last one, the pain was felt then. The decisions we made and said, so it was an opportunity to revise that in this one.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear because I remember that having the exact same issues with Winky in the original game. You never quite knew where his hitbox was, and he would just go running off and trying to get back on him was a pain. So that's so interesting to hear that. That's why it was replaced.
Yes, he's best avoided, Winky. Whenever you see him, just don't get on.
Well, speaking of characters, it wasn't beyond just animal buddies and Dixie Kong as well. We had a couple of new Kongs here too, such as Swanky Kong and Wrinkly Kong. Do you remember just what may have inspired their inclusion and any of their personality traits? With such as Wrinkly Kong, of course, being the wife to Cranky Kong. Did you have any memories back to them when you were making the game?
I can't think of anything that jumps out. I remember Swanky Kong. I thought, always a bit cheap. He's just basically DK with a kind of a suit on and a wig.
Are they not all just DK with a different? Shh. Except Clubber.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Was Wrinkly kind of, or maybe added you have more tips in this game? Was that maybe because the game was more challenging, or is it just something you want to do to make it more accessible to people? When you give them tips on different secrets and levels and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. It was intended for the first game, and there just wasn't time, and it was something that was carried over onto the second one. Or again, it's just the designers just wanted to make things better for the sequel. You just try to make it bigger and better.
I think for this game there was an emphasis on there being more exploration than the first game, because the first game was more about getting to the end of the level as fast as possible, whereas here there was lots of secrets to find in each level. So I think it kind of lent itself more to a situation where the player would benefit more from more help or advice, or and also things like the quiz as well, where there's questions to answer that probably infuriate some people but, when they get there.
That's why I don't get many DK coins then, because I always skip the wrinkly and swanky sections.
Yes.
Yeah, the game definitely seemed just to be a lot denser than the original. I think that's partially why it feels like it really does hold up, like especially in comparison to, say, Mario World, which had a lot of secrets of its own, and Donkey Kong Country 2 really seemed to kind of lean in that direction, with there being like hidden, collectibles, and you can use those to unlock levels in the secret world, the lost, I forget what it's called now, the Lost World maybe. And I remember even now, my dad at the time, he ran an insurance agency out of the house, and one of his clients that came to the house worked at Nintendo of America in the I think it was a power line, a Nintendo Power counselor. So you called him up for we needed help in the game, and he came down to my room and showed me all the secrets in the first world of the game, and apparently there was like a shortcut in every level starting off that'll just warp you right to the end. I'm like, it just blew my mind. I'm like, I had no idea those were there. Such like well hidden secrets in this game that I think really make it just really fun to explore and discover what's there, what's hidden there.
Yeah, I think that was the intention, that the game was kind of focused more on exploration. So if you find those secrets, you feel like you're the only the only person in the world that there's no internet, or
right.
less back then. So you did feel like, I found this cool thing and nobody else knows about it, until maybe it appears in Nintendo Power a few months later.
Exactly.
Did the engine for the game have to be reworked at all to allow for like more verticality in these larger environments that could be explored, or was it mostly just building off it still and without many changes?
Yeah, I don't think there was too many changes to it, because I think we'd done a lot of the groundwork in the first one. Perhaps a bit more to do with the verticality, but it was, the techniques were generally similar to, because that's what really enabled us to get going as fast as we could. Because if I remember the first game, it wasn't by by this time of the year, November, we had I think 2 levels running, and then we had. So each you think in the first game that wasn't very many. So by end of the year, we had about 2 levels representative of what we wanted to do for the rest of the game, and some of them were in maybe a few other levels in an earlier stage. So then after that, we did have to work quite hard to get, because we were building a lot of the infrastructure for the game and tools and things. Whereas after that, we had to kind of get going and make everything. Whereas finishing the first game, and then I guess we started development, it would have been in about October 1994. Then we could just jump straight on in that period of time, where in the previous game, the first game, we'd been building infrastructure. We could actually just start building levels. So there probably wasn't too much done to the engine, because we wanted to get on and just build out levels.
Yeah, out of curiosity, how exactly did the editor work? Now I'm picturing it as if it were Mario Maker which I'm sure wasn't the case, but was the editor pretty flexible in allowing these level creations, or how exactly did that work back in the day?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember. I think there was several stages to it, because what used to happen was, for a new level or a new set of visuals, so if it was brambles or say a forest or something, somebody would render images that were going to be used to composite the level in on a Silicon graphics machine, and then those images, kind of side-on images, would be taken and in a custom kind of tool, which is a bit like Photoshop now, but it was a very, very simple version of that, and they take the original image, which was over 16 million colors, and it would then reduce it to a palette of 16 colors, typically, possibly less in some cases, and then there was only a certain number of palettes you could have access to, so you had a very limited number of palettes to work with, but it was a case of condensing all those down into then not just a small number of colors, a smaller resolution, but also then making repeatable blocks out of them, a bit like Mario. And so whereas in Mario you could just draw them I think it was a bit more simpler, a much simpler version of that. So once you'd built a library of these blocks, and you could only have a certain number as well, that's the other thing. So you had to kind of choose your battles wisely and think, well, I need a corner piece and this kind of piece here and this other piece, but you need to know exactly what you needed for that level, because there was never, it was always quite tight on space in the number of different blocks you could use. So yeah, it was a tool that allowed us to build those out, and then there's another part that allows us to place the bananas on the level, and then you could press a button and try and play through.
Nice. I would love if there were eventually a Donkey Kong Country 2 maker. I want to make my own, my own levels. Let's see. So were either of you involved much with the? You already touched on the Game Boy port earlier, but were you involved with much of the other ports for or any of the ports for the game? I believe there was Donkey Kong Land 2. There was the Donkey Kong Country 2 port and Game Boy Advance. And then there was also, I believe, a canceled Virtual Boy version of Donkey Kong Country 2. So did you have any involvement directly with any of those three?
No, I didn't.
I didn't actually know. No, so I don't think I ever saw the Virtual Boy version. So I don't quite know what it looked like or how far that progressed.
A lot of red.
Yeah, very red.
Yes.
It's very red, yeah.
Were there any, I think you may have alluded to it before, but were there like any debates internally in terms of like what needs to be made into the game, or a particular direction for anything in the game? Do you remember anything like or not questionable, but like anything that there was internal debate about as it pertains to the game itself?
I remember, apart from, we talked about the video game Heroes screen. I do remember there being that seemed to go on for quite a while. From what I remember, it was being debated for quite a while. From what I remember, I wasn't involved in the debates, but apart from that, I don't know those. Don't think if there's anything that comes to mind. It's usually for the kind of things that Steve and I work on. They're usually kind of lots of small things, but they're not things that are that memorable. So they're things like the way that the character might charge or something, or whether something should be allowed to roll off an edge and then jump, or those kind of like quite small things like that. I don't think there'll be anything vast.
We'd ironed out most of the creases in the first one. We took a lot of time on the first one getting the moves right for Donkey Kong. We had various bizarre things. Like one thing was you'd hit an enemy on the head and kind of leapfrog over it and be able to kick another enemy as you came down the other side. We had lots of weird ideas like that before we just came up with just the basic roll move, and you'd be able to roll off an edge. Because all that was in place, it was just really getting the new enemies to work properly.
Right.
One thing I can imagine that we might have, I was just kind of on the notion of animal buddies, is when you ride on squawks. I imagine we probably tried it first, so Diddy and Dixie are vulnerable when if you land on a spiky surface, but I think we changed that to make it so that they didn't, because I think so that you basically had to focus on Squawks' head and his sides rather than worrying about both the top and bottom.
Yeah, that still confuses me now. When I was playing it the other day, I was still playing it as if the Kongs were vulnerable as well, so I was probably making it harder for myself until I realised about halfway through, you can just rest on these brambles, this is really easy.
Yeah, so I suspect we did originally try that, and I imagine that what happened is it became so difficult and annoying because having these two characters that are just dangling there that you can just clip easily into things, that we made it the other way. But it is a strange gameplay mechanic, because like you say, when you rest on things it doesn't look quite right, but it probably plays okay.
I had a bit of a problem on some of the jumps, especially like the trickier jumps in the swamp, where you're like trying to come down directly on top of like a crocodile head, or directly on top of one of the balloons in the lava level. I had problems sometimes distinguishing between the two characters. I'm surprised there wasn't more discussion at the time about that, but I don't think it was ever considered an issue.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps, I didn't think about it until really now. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of weird. You can just rest on the brambles and not take damage.
No complaints.
And it is, and now that you mention it, it's kind of interesting too, because there are points in the game in which you will, instead of riding the animal, you'll just turn into that animal. And I was wondering if there was a particular reason for that at points, because it seems like that would kind of resolve the spacing issue with Squawk specifically. But
yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. I think the reason was that well, there's two reasons. One is it actually adds. It's one of the things we do quite well in this game is we kind of I don't know how to describe it other than kind of squeezing the sponge. So you basically take content that you already have or ideas that you already have, and you squeeze them a bit further to get more value out of them. So it's just why things like the barrels and so often have so many different variations, because each variation you make is like you're building on the top of a foundation of a system you already have. So it's actually quite easy to make a new variation. So the reason we might have had it so that you play as the animal bodies is the other reason is it means you have you're able to take advantage of it's like a different kind of set of gameplay, because if you're playing with the other characters, then you've got to worry about what happens if I lose the character, I come off, and then I've got to be able to get to the end with Diddy or Dixie. But then if you think about it differently, you think, well, if I'm only this animal, then I don't have to worry about that case. You don't have to solve that. So it probably opens up a different set of gameplay possibilities. So there's that side of it. And then the other side is it allows you to squeeze that sponge and bring out different ideas. It feels like a different feature almost. Whereas in reality, what's actually happening, I can't remember if this is absolutely the case, but it wouldn't surprise me if everything else is running, although it's not drawing the other characters. They're probably there in spirit in some way. You could probably turn them on, and they'd probably pop in, because I imagine that's what it is basically a case of. It's like just imagine the characters are there, but they're not shown on screen. So again, it's a case of taking something that works and then tweaking it slightly so it looks like a whole new feature. But actually, in fact, the amount of development work is quite small, and I think we do that quite a lot during the game, which is why maybe it feels like there's so much to it, because ideas are squeezed or content is squeezed in such a way to make maximum use of it.
I had a fun question to ask you guys. If you were to make another Donkey Kong Country today, what two Kongs would you pick for it, or would you create new Kongs?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, traditionally, Rare had always, whenever there's a new Donkey Kong game, new Kongs were created for some reason. I've no idea why. It was just the way it was. I mean, look at DK2, there's thousands of Kongs in that.
That's right. The extended family. Yeah, so I suspect the answer is we'd probably follow that trend and we'd just create. Why rest on our laurels? Why not just invent new ones? Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, thank you.
And eventually that'll make way for the Donkey Kong kart racing game, I'm sure. Just 1,000
Right, yeah.
Kongs. I guess now that it sounds like you both revisited or at least looked up videos of the game. So I was curious if, looking back on now, 25 years later, is there anything that stands out to you in particular about it, or anything you think you would do differently these days, or anything that comes to mind, I wish we'd changed this about it? I guess just what is it like looking back now after all this time on a game that is cherished by many?
Something that stands out for me that we haven't mentioned today is the soundtrack, which somehow Dave Wise managed to make it even better than the first one.
Yes.
And I'd probably say it's my favourite video game soundtrack of all time, and I'll regularly listen to it as I'm working. I mean, some of the tunes, they're just classics.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's funny when I watch or play it, things I tend to notice are things that are, in my eyes, wrong or not quite right. I think I mentioned some of them earlier, but also things like there's hooks that you jump on and you can hang from your tail or your hair. And I still to this day don't like the fact that you jump and you just kind of teleport to the bottom of this hook. So I still don't like that. And I prefer there was some kind of, strangely enough for me, considering I'm usually chopping out frames of animation, I would prefer to have some kind of blending going in there so that was clear. And then similarly, I think I was watching the video of this, and there was, I think it was Rambi exiting a doorway, and he just slid through the doorway. And I thought, he doesn't walk out the door. Why does he not walk out the door? And that kind of thing just disturbs me now, because I suppose it's what I do. When things don't work or things aren't in there isn't an animation or something, it kind of makes that's not right, we should have fixed that. And so those are the things. Funny enough, everybody else looks at it in a different way, but when I look at things, I always tend to look at the things that aren't quite right, and then I kind of focus on those rather than anything else.
Yeah, I know some people like the level end celebrations, but I'm not sure they've aged too well. They're a little bit cringy now, I think. What do you guys think?
I don't know if I would say they're cringy, but they do stand out these days. Like I remember at the time, like this game, they're really hip. Diddy's got his boombox, but yeah, probably it does definitely stand out a little bit, especially I guess in comparison with the pirate theme, where the theme was going back in time, but then you have these very modern elements on top of it. But as a kid, it did not bother me in the slightest. So
I remember at the time there was a discussion with one of the programmers. It was like, well, why does Diddy's boombox and his sunglasses just appear? There should be like a cloud or something to mask it appearing in, and we were like, oh no, it's just really funny that it just appears.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just so ridiculous.
And I do remember being impressed by it, like seeing the 3 dimensions of the boombox as like Diddy sways side to side. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty neat. So
that's right. And then his little kind of rap, which is I
don't know if you guys saw a couple of months ago in September, Donkey Kong Country 2 was trending on Twitter because of the announcement that it was coming to the Nintendo Switch Online Super Nintendo app. So basically, it shows that this game, 25 years later, is still making its mark. People love this game, who both grew up with it, and those who are experiencing it for the first time. What's that like for you as game creators to see a game that you made still resonate with gamers to this day?
I think it's great that people still want to play the game, and like you say, it shows that it's got legs and long legs that last a while. The thing I noticed playing it actually is that it's much harder than I remember. It feels much harder than the first game. Even the first few levels are like I'm playing it going, was it really this difficult? But I guess maybe we were better in those days.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a variety of interesting levels. You're never sure, what you're going to come across in the next level, which I think is part of its appeal.
Yeah, absolutely. It was always a surprise around every corner in that game, it seemed. When you end up like at an amusement park, for instance, riding a roller coaster. Yeah.
What's that all about?
It doesn't matter. It was great.
It was great, but too hard.
Yes. Especially, I was replaying it myself I was streaming it for when it hit the Nintendo Switch Online app, and I got to I think it's a second roller coaster level, and you have to, in order to fully beat it, you have to like roll back at the start to hit a secret barrel that sends you just gives you a huge burst of speed, and I'm like, I can't even keep up with it. So what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, watching some of the speedrunners do it, after I played it recently, it's just amazing what they can do. I don't know how they do it. Though just the precisions, it's just amazing.
So looking back at the game again now, is there anything you're both most proud of individually, whether in terms of your own contribution to the project or just in general? Is there anything that stands out to you these days about it that you're like, I really liked what this game did in that aspect, or what I did for this game?
For me, I just liked the amount of interaction we had with the animal buddies. I thought that was really cool, and the way they worked together. And then also the way that we kind of advanced the character interaction from the first game, like we said, where it was just one character following another, and then it became more like, oh, there's a reason to be one character versus another character, and then the ability to throw them that kind of interaction as well. That we kind of moved things forward a little bit, I think, in many different ways from the first game.
Yeah, I was pleased with Dixie at the time, and she seems to have stood the test of time. She's been in a few other games since, most notably the retro DKC games. So I was really pleased with her. I had a lot of fun trying to animate that giant banana, which is her hair.
Yeah, was that tricky at all, considering especially when you're flying, that increases her sprite size considerably. So yeah, was that difficult, like getting her hair to animate correctly and within your frame budget or memory budget?
It was quite time consuming because it's so brighter and a lot thicker than Diddy's tail, so
Right.
it was much more obvious on screen. So yeah, it was a little bit more time consuming, but always a lot of fun, and it always gave it'd give her movements a certain fluidity that Donkey Kong especially didn't have, because he didn't have any form of tail whatsoever.
And kind of to that point, perhaps one of the things that stands out most to me is I think it was 102% special ending, I believe, or the special ending when you fully finish a game, and that's when you get like this really beautiful view of Donkey Kong, Diddy, and Dixie, standing on the cliff edge, watching as like the island explodes in the distance. And I remember both the water look, the whole thing looks amazing. I remember specifically Dixie's hair and how just smooth it looked in the animation.
Yeah, I think it was Mark Stevenson again that did that screen. But I remember Greg saying at the time, I want it to be like Japanese like manga animation where they're watching something and their hair's blowing in the wind, that sort of things.
I just wanted to ask quickly, are there any recent titles that you've been enjoying, and are you looking forward to the new generation of consoles?
Well, I don't play many games anymore. I usually just watch what my kids are playing now sometimes. I just don't have the time, really.
We cover games for a living, and I get that.
Yeah.
I've been I gave Panel de Pon a good go on the Switch Online. Really enjoyed getting back to that, but I've kind of gone by that now. No, what about you, Chris?
I've got most of my things I play tend to be on the Switch, so I've had, although I'm on Xbox, on PC now as well. But I tend to, I had to go Animal Crossing, but I didn't get that far into that one. I tend to find I start lots of things and then never get that far. Mario Odyssey was probably the thing that I played most of, but then I kind of keep coming back to that. Played a bit of Steam World, and I started Super Smash Brothers, but I didn't quite get into it. So and Luigi's Mansion, I think I played that quite a bit. I need to get back into that. So I just have this scrolling list of things that I keep thinking, let's go back and play that, finish that, I get to finish that. But eventually I usually get a bit further on, but then what tends to happen is another game comes out and then I start to play that. So I'm caught in this eternal loop of starting things but never finishing them.
We need more shorter games, is I think the essence of that point.
Yes, I think so, yes. I'd be very happy if every game could be finished in a few hours.
and less buttons to press as well, please.
Oh, I totally hear that. I've been my dad only relatively recently got into games, and he's been expanding slowly into what he plays, but every game is a battle, and him trying to learn the control scheme, and especially with how in one game that's similar, even though the things you're doing are identical, the buttons for them is completely different. It just completely trips them up. Trips me up too, but for him as a newer gamer, it's especially difficult. So
yeah, I have a problem in life with distinguishing left from right. I'm sure that it's some kind of condition. So you can imagine when I've got a joypad full of left and right buttons, if someone says, "Oh, it's the right trigger," I'm there pressing the left one, and it's not doing anything. So yeah, that's part of my problem.
Well, I think we're just about done here. Is there anything else about Donkey Kong Country 2 specifically that you wanted to share that we didn't touch on, or any other memories, or anything related to the game that you wanted to bring up that we haven't yet?
Yes. Speaking for myself, I just felt incredibly lucky to be working on these Donkey Kong games at Rare. It was just such an amazing time.
Yeah, I think I'd second that. I think what I'd say is that at the time, I probably didn't appreciate how fortunate I was. But when you look back and you go, oh, actually, yes, that's quite it. You didn't think it was going to be as historically significant within the gaming as it was. So, yeah, it was very fortunate to end up working on that game series, in fact.
Yeah, I can't thank both of you enough. This was one of my favorite games growing up, still is. And I guess to that point, I do have one more question here from one of our fans, Truly John 64, who asks, how did they make the perfect sequel? Because I think that is largely why a lot of people still love this game to this day, and many still consider it to be one of the best, if not the best platformer ever made, one of their favorite games of all time. yeah, I guess, why do you think that is? Or what do you think it is about the game that has resonated with people all this time?
I think, well, one thing I think we touched on earlier was the notion that we were able to refine things from the first one. So we kind of knew the things that didn't work, and we were able to kind of roll straight into it and fix them in a way we did have, although it was the same, we had to finish both in a year, we kind of had more time, like I was saying in the second one, because we set up so much things in advance. So that helped us kind of refine things and adjust things and make those tweaks and improvements to kind of advance it a bit further. And then I think also changing from the first one to be less speedrunny and more about exploration, and that kind of also give it a different kind of feel as well.
Do you have anything to add, Steve, to that at all?
Steve?
Well, no, I mean, as much as I'm loath to give my brother any plaudits, he did, he just did a fantastic job on the design.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps up for us here. So, Steve, Chris, I want to thank you again so much for hopping on with us to discuss the 25th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country 2. Absolutely one of my favorite games of all time. And I guess I just wanted to give you opportunity if you wanted to tell our audience that there's anything they should check out, any projects they should check out that you've been involved with recently, or where they may want to follow you on, such as on Twitter. This is your chance to let the audience know how they could check out more of your work or follow you on social media.
Sure. If you enjoyed Donkey Kong Country 2, you might also enjoy Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. Which you may find has certain similarities to that game in terms of influence. So that's available on all good platforms, and check it out online.
Perfect. And how about you, Steve? Anything?
Yes, indeed. Check it out. And you can always buy the first one as well if you like. We still get money for that if you buy that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You absolutely, everyone should, I agree. If anyone here, or I assume everyone here is a fan of Donkey Kong Country 2, check out The Impossible Lair. Fantastic game, fantastic sequel, and it really does embody the spirit of the Donkey Kong series while also doing its own thing. So fantastic game. I loved it when I played it. And check it out, everyone. So, Steve, Chris, I just want to thank you one more time for again coming on with us to discuss the 25th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country 2. And so it's just been a blast being able to talk with you about, again, two of my favorite games of all time, that we've now celebrated their 25th anniversaries for. And I guess real quick, were either of you much involved with Donkey Kong Country 3? Do we have to come back one more time next year?
No, I won't be here. I didn't have anything to do with it. There'll be some new people for you next year.
All right.
Yeah, sadly,
more interesting people.
Yeah, I wasn't involved either with number 3, so we by that time we'd moved on to Banjo-Kazooie. So you'd need other participants for next year.
Sounds good. That'll be it'll be a little bit different than next year.
Yeah.
But
maybe we can be back in another 25 years for the 50th.
Let's hope. Absolutely, that'd be amazing. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching our interview with Steve and Chris. If you want more videos like this, make sure to check out the other ones you can see on the screen right now. Give them a click. And of course, make sure to click that subscribe button and ring that bell for more on Donkey Kong Country 2's 25th anniversary coming up, and everything else Nintendo as well. We'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.